You probably think of sleep as the simplest thing your body does. You lie down, you close your eyes, you drift off. But somewhere in the middle of the night, in a house with the doors locked and the windows shut, something in you still doesn't feel completely at ease. Maybe it's the empty side of the bed. Maybe it's the silence of an apartment with no one else breathing in it. You tell yourself it's nothing. But your brain disagrees. For almost the entire history of your species, sleeping by yourself would have been almost unthinkable. Not because ancient humans lacked privacy, because sleeping alone was dangerous enough to be a death sentence. Picture your ancestors 40,000 years ago, settling down for the night on the edge of a valley. There is no roof over their heads, there is no locked door, there is only a fire, a scattering of bodies close together, and the darkness pressing in from every direction. A predator does not care how tired you are, a drop in temperature does not wait for morning, and a human alone, unconscious, unaware of their surroundings for 8 hours, is the easiest meal on the landscape. So, they didn't sleep alone, they piled together, children between parents, elders near the center, where the warmth pooled and the wind couldn't reach. The most exposed positions at the edges were often taken by the physically strongest adults, the ones most likely to wake first if something moved in the grass. This wasn't a cultural preference, it was survival architecture. And it raises a question that most people never think to ask. If sleeping together was so essential, what exactly was your body doing differently back then that it no longer does tonight? Archaeologists have found something strange when they study the sleeping arrangements at ancient hearths and rock shelters. The clustering of sleeping spaces around a single fire, repeated across continents and thousands of years, isn't just about staying warm. It shows up even in regions where the climate barely dropped at night. Something else was pulling ancient humans together in sleep, something bigger than temperature. That something becomes clearer when you look at the humans who still live this way today. In hunter-gatherer communities studied across Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia, sleep is almost never a solitary act. Multiple generations share the same fire, the same shelter, sometimes the same skin blanket. And when researchers have measured what happens physically during that shared sleep, they found something you wouldn't expect. People sleeping near others fall asleep faster. Their heart rate settles into a steadier rhythm. Levels of cortisol, the hormone your body releases when it senses danger, drop measurably when another person is nearby. Sleeping close to someone else isn't just comfortable. It is your nervous system receiving a chemical signal that says the watch has changed. Someone else is on guard now. You can let go. But here is where the story gets stranger, because your ancestors weren't simply falling asleep together and staying unconscious until dawn. Evidence from historical sleep patterns, along with observations from communities without electric light, points to something almost nobody does anymore. Ancient humans likely slept in 2 separate blocks each night, waking for an hour or more in the middle of the darkness before returning to sleep again. Think about that for a moment. An entire chunk of the night was spent conscious, in the dark, doing something with that time. Your first guess might be that this was simply restlessness, a broken, inferior kind of sleep compared to the smooth 8-hour block you chase every night. But the more researchers look at it, the less that explanation holds up. The leading explanation among researchers who study this pattern is that this waking window wasn't wasted time. It was social time, a quiet hour to tend the fire, check on a restless child, whisper with whoever else was awake, listen to the shape of the night. In a world with no clocks and no artificial light, that middle of the night waking may have doubled as a built-in safety check. Someone was always semi-alert. The group, as a whole, never fully went dark. This is where the real reason starts to take shape. Sleep, for almost all of human history, was never meant to be a solo activity. It was a shared shift, a rotating watch disguised as rest. Your body evolved inside that system for hundreds of thousands of years. Your brain did not evolve to sleep in isolation. It evolved to sleep in a pile of other brains, each one contributing a small piece of vigilance to the whole. And that changes everything about why a locked door and a quiet house still don't feel like enough. Your brain today still runs the same threat detection software your ancestors carried through the last ice age. It doesn't know that your neighborhood has no leopards. It doesn't know that the sound outside is a car engine, not a predator testing the edge of the fire. When you are alone at night, some ancient part of your nervous system quietly registers that no one else is standing watch. There is a reason people sleep more lightly in an unfamiliar room and more deeply on a trip with a partner or a friend nearby. It is not really about the mattress, it is about how many other minds are on alert. There is a counterintuitive twist here that surprises most people the first time they hear it. You might assume that early humans, exhausted from a day of hunting or foraging, would have slept like the dead the moment they lay down. The opposite seems to be closer to the truth. Ancient sleep was probably lighter, more easily interrupted, and more socially embedded than most sleep today. Deep, uninterrupted, isolated sleep, the kind modern life prizes and modern bedrooms are built for, may be one of the more unusual sleeping arrangements in the entire history of your species, not the default one. But something even stranger emerges once you compare this to how your closest primate relatives sleep. Chimpanzees build a fresh sleeping nest almost every night, high in the trees, out of reach of ground predators. That height gave them a form of safety your ancestors gave up the moment they started sleeping on open ground. So how did a species that traded the safety of the treetops for the exposure of the savannah manage to survive its most vulnerable hours? The answer isn't a stronger body or sharper senses, it's the group itself. Numbers replaced height as the primary defense, and numbers only work as protection if the sleepers stay close enough to warn each other. This gives you a second, deeper reason for the discomfort of solitary sleep, one that goes beyond simple vigilance. Anthropologists who study attachment and bonding point out that close physical contact during rest triggers the release of oxytocin, a hormone strongly tied to trust and social bonding. That means the sleeping pile wasn't only a defense system, it was also functioning as a kind of nightly reinforcement of the social bonds that held the group together during the day. Waking up pressed against your family wasn't incidental. It may have been part of what kept a group of unrelated individuals willing to risk their lives for one another when danger came. This helps explain something that shows up again and again in modern life, something that has nothing to do with mattresses or blackout curtains. People who live alone consistently report worse sleep quality than people who share a home, even when the room, the noise level, and the temperature are identical. Soldiers report sleeping more soundly in a tent full of other people than alone in private quarters, even in a war zone, even with the added noise around them. New parents, exhausted beyond belief, often describe feeling strangely calmer the moment another adult is in the room, even if that person is also asleep. Your nervous system is still keeping score of who else is nearby, the same way it did around a fire 40,000 years ago. Loneliness itself may be part of this same ancient alarm system. When researchers study the biological signature of chronic loneliness, they find elevated stress hormones, disrupted sleep cycles, and a nervous system stuck in a low-grade state of vigilance. The same physical signature you would expect in a person who suspects they are not being watched over. Feeling alone at night may not simply be an emotional experience, it may be your body interpreting the absence of a group the same way it once interpreted the absence of a fire. Here is another detail that rarely makes it into the conversation about sleep, and it might be the strangest one yet. Infants across cultures, when placed to sleep completely alone, show measurable spikes in stress hormones almost immediately, even in a warm, safe, quiet room. Their bodies do not yet understand modern safety. They only understand an older rule, one written by hundreds of thousands of years of shared sleeping. Alone means unguarded, and unguarded to a body running on ancient instructions still means unsafe. There is one more piece of evidence worth sitting with because it comes from the ground itself, rather than from any living community. At several ancient dwelling sites, archaeologists have uncovered the layout of communal huts, built around a central hearth with sleeping areas arranged in a ring rather than scattered randomly across the space. That ring pattern shows up again and again in different climates, different time periods, and different cultures that never had contact with one another. When the same architectural choice appears independently across the world, it usually means the same underlying pressure produced it. In this case, that pressure was almost certainly the same one driving everything else in this story. Safety in numbers arranged so that no single sleeper was ever fully exposed to the dark on every side. It is worth being honest about where the evidence is solid and where it becomes more of an educated guess. The clustering of sleeping spaces around hearths is well documented in the archaeological record. The idea that early humans experienced two distinct sleep phases each night rests on a mix of historical accounts and modern observations of communities living without artificial light, which makes it a strong interpretation rather than an absolute certainty. And the deeper claim that this waking period functioned specifically as a rotating watch is a reasonable hypothesis built on those patterns rather than something anyone can prove directly from a fossil or a hearth. Keeping that distinction in mind doesn't weaken the story. It shows you exactly how confident you should be about each part of it. None of this means solitude is dangerous today. Locks work, walls work. The modern world has replaced the watchful eyes of the group with steel and glass, and for the most part, it works remarkably well. But the ancient wiring underneath your modern life didn't get the memo. It still expects a circle of familiar breathing somewhere nearby. It still relaxes a little more when it can hear another heartbeat in the dark. So the next time you notice that quiet unease of an empty house at night, you are not imagining a threat that isn't there. You are hearing an old instruction, one written into your nervous system long before doors had locks or cities had lights. Somewhere underneath the modern version of you is an ancestor, curled beside a fire, listening for the sound of someone else breathing, trusting that the person next to them was doing the same thing you still quietly hope for every night, making sure you were not the only one awake in the dark.